Just a few hours ago today, 12th of June 2025, Air India 171 operating a Boeing 787 from Ahmedabad to London Gatwick experienced catastrophic mechanical failure just after takeoff, leading to a crash into a doctor-student hostel, causing 242 passengers and several people on the ground to perish. But what really happened to Air India 171 flight?
If you're new around here, I'm Mike. I'm a student pilot, a former engineer, and here on this channel I'll talk about some aviation incidents, some trip reports, and some travel hacks.
So let's start with what we know so far. The Air India 171 flight departed from runway 23 at around 1:30 p.m. IST. It reached an altitude of 625 feet, at which point it issued a mayday, followed by communication loss and a plunge into the doctor-student hostel. All 242 on board perished, plus several on the ground, with no survivors reported. The flight carried 169 Indian passengers, 53 British passengers, 7 Portuguese passengers, and 1 Canadian. The aircraft, Victor Tango Alpha November Bravo, was 11 years old with around 40,000 hours of operation. And what makes this incident so shocking is it is the very first Dreamliner crash since it started its operation, with fatalities and a loss of the hull. As we watch the best available footage of the incident caught on an airport CCTV, we can see that the aircraft is hurtling down the runway, and just after takeoff you can see that the pilot doesn't immediately initiate the retracting of the landing gear, which is for many airlines the standard operating procedure, that between 50 and 100 foot you will start retracting the landing gear. But as you can see here in the footage, the landing gear stays down, and it stays down throughout the entirety of this sadly very, very short flight. And at this point you actually can see how the aircraft starts to dip down because there's not enough lift. The right wing dips slightly, indicating a possibility of a stall, and then the airplane comes crashing down, sadly hitting the ground and killing almost all passengers. So the formerly state-owned Air India started using this aircraft in 2013 and had used it on many of their routes. Now the airline is owned by Tata Industries. Since the 787 Dreamliner generally started its operation, it was involved in 8 aviation incidences, but so far there were 0 fatalities. And as mentioned before, this is the first incident with a total loss of the hull of the aircraft. This specific aircraft was equipped with the GEnx engines that are known to be very reliable, and at this point both Boeing and GE are collaborating in the investigation itself. Right now the investigators are looking into mechanical or hydraulic failures, specifically in regards to the flaps and the landing gear not being stowed. When we look at the footage of the incident itself, the aircraft is not clean, which means it still has the flaps extended and the landing gear out, which means most likely the pilot was not able to configure the airplane properly after takeoff, hinting at the probability of hydraulic or mechanical failure. Right now, pilot error cannot be ruled out, but the way the aircraft looks during the rapid descent, it really seems like the mechanics were not working as they were supposed to be, or as they designed, as usually as soon as an aircraft lifts off the ground, the landing gear would be retracted. As we also can see in the footage, the airplane is in a very strong nose up attitude as it is descending, and it seems to be close to a stall, or at least not as maneuverable as one would expect. The pilots themselves are Captain Sumit Sabharwal with over 8,200 flight hours and First Officer Clive Kunda with 1,100 hours. Both of those pilots followed standard Boeing 787 Dreamliner training. So what could be the possible reasons for this absolutely devastating crash? Now, a lot of eyewitnesses reported some bangs and explosions during the takeoff of the aircraft, which could hint at some issues with the engines themselves, which also could lead to mechanical problems like issues with the hydraulics. If we look at the footage of the airplane coming down, you actually can hear the engines a little bit in the background. It's a little bit difficult because the footage was just filmed with a phone, but you can definitely hear the engines of the airplane. It's not quite clear now, but these explosions really fuel the speculation of there being some system errors or mechanical faults. The next possibility is improper configuration. The flaps and the landing gears are still down, and that could suggest either a failure in the retraction system or also, sadly, in the crew response. The aircraft crashed just beyond the airport boundaries, which means it also could have hit some sort of structure still within the airport. It did hit into the airport wall, I believe. So this could also lead into the next possibility, which could be the fuel load factor. The aircraft was heavily fueled for a long-haul flight, which intensified the fire upon impact and which also, of course, made the aeroplane very heavy upon takeoff. The environmental conditions at the airport seemed very good. The meter itself showed clear weather, ruling out adverse weather as a contributing factor. At this point, it really is just speculation of what could have happened. The investigation will definitely show, and we'll need to see the black box data and the flight recorder. As this is the first time that a 787 Dreamliner has crashed, right now, all of the opinions are just speculation, as we really have to wait for the data from the flight recorder and the black box to really figure out what happened to this flight. Was it mechanical error? Was it a pilot error? Or was there some other incident like bird strike? Right now, we really don't know it. With other aircrafts in the past, like with the series of crashes with the 737s, there was an issue that kept on repeating, so you could kind of guess like what the issue was from. But really with the 787, the aircraft is fairly new. It is modern. It was always called the uncrashable airplane, but sadly today it finally did happen, and we did actually lose a 787 Dreamliner, which is quite devastating, being that most of us aviation geeks really love the Dreamliner and have flown it on so many routes. So this is really, really sad. But seeing the Boeing coming down in a complete wrong configuration for the situation really does remind of the recent incident in South Korea, where an airplane also came down in the wrong configuration. In this case, it was the opposite. It was the landing gear was up and the flaps were retracted. So the exact opposite of what we had this time. But with that incident, it also seemed like the airplane seemed completely incorrect configured, as it did in this point. But going by the mayday that the pilot called out just after takeoff, and considering that the whole flight only took 3 to 5 minutes, and the pilot most likely lost control of the aircraft at a very low altitude of 625 foot, there likely wasn't a lot the pilot could have done in this situation. But as mentioned before, the investigation will definitely tell us more. Well, right now, as of 14:32 Zulu time, the latest speculation of the investigators is that the aircraft suffered from a lack of lift due to insufficient thrust, which led the pilots to pull back on the yoke far too much, leading to a very strong nose-up attitude of the aircraft and also bleeding a lot of airspeed through that pulling back on the yoke. And in response to this incident, the Boeing stocks dropped by 7.7% and the GE stocks dropped by around 4%. Of course, we know Boeing hasn't had the best track record of safety in the past. There's been a lot of incidents with their aircraft. They've had a lot of issues with the hull of the 787. They've had a lot of issues with the 737 MAXs, but so far GE itself has had a very clean track record and there haven't been many issues. So it'll be really interesting to see how this whole incident and how this whole investigation plays out over the next few weeks and months. Let me know in the comments down below what your opinion is. What is your most likely speculation of what could have happened? I really do believe that there is some issue with the thrust, which led the pilots maybe to misreact in this situation. But yeah, it is definitely very, very devastating, and I'll keep you guys up to date. I'll follow this whole story as much as I can, and I might do an update on the story very soon. If you'd like to see a little bit more upbeat aviation news, then maybe check out my flight reviews that are linked in the description box down below. Subscribe here if you're new here, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.